This is Chapter 7, Part 4. We stopped last time talking about the necessity of drug treatment programs of some kind. Let's continue. Um, I updated the numbers a little bit, but they're similar to the older numbers from the textbook. That the percentage of inmates, in state prison, I believe it's state prison and federal prisons, merging those two numbers together. Uh, the number of inmates receiving some sort of formal, like serious, real drug treatment while incarcerated is only about 10%. I think the textbook says like 11%. My numbers are newer, but it's say roughly 1 out of 10. That's not much. That's even though we saw in the last segment just how many of these inmates are drug involved, have a history of drug abuse or alcohol abuse. So 10% is a pretty low number. Jails house inmates so let's talk about jails first, and then we'll talk about prisons. What do jails do? Jails hold people who are awaiting trial, so we're calling that pre-trial confinement. They're awaiting trial and not deemed to be safe to allow to roam freely in society. But also those who are serving shorter sentences, less than a year. Short sentences, you serve those in jail. Well, many of these individuals who are in jail, just like in prisons, they need drug treatment, but it doesn't happen much. And a lot of the reason for that is that these jails are very short-term facilities. People are constantly coming and going, in and out, in and out, in and out. It's kind of a fluid, unstable situation for the jails, and so it creates kind of a challenge to have serious, especially long-term drug treatment in these jail facilities when it's such a fluid sort of place. People in and out, and some there for longer periods, but a lot of people there for relatively short periods of time. So, long story short, jails are sort of problematic for drug treatment. But also there's this what they call net widening problem. Net widening occurs when an intervention casts too wide of a net, bringing in individuals who would otherwise be subjected to less restrictive settings or intrusive sanctions. And so the example that they give in the textbook really helps make this clear what they're talking about. For example, a judge may sentence a defendant to jail in order for him or her to have access to a jail-based substance abuse program. If the program had not existed, the defendant would have instead been mandated to participate in a community-based intervention. See, so this is the problem. If you don't have a good opportunity for this defendant to get treatment in the community, and the judge wants this person to get drug treatment, then maybe they'll get confined to jail. They'll get a jail sentence because the judge, first and foremost, wants you to get treated. And so if you got to go to jail to get treated, well, there's the opportunity's there, so let's put you in jail. See, so they call that net widening because you're ending up getting, in a way, you're getting punished more severely by being sent to jail because that's where the opportunities are for drug treatment. So you can see the problem there, right? So that's what they mean by net widening. From a criminal justice system standpoint, net widening is costly. If we're putting a lot of people in jail, that's more expensive than them being in the community. Since individuals who would benefit from a less intrusive and less expensive intervention are mandated to a more expensive one. So keep this in mind. The more secure the facility, the more expensive it is to keep inmates there because it's just higher security requires more personnel, more of everything. And so it's the more restrictive, the more expensive. The less restrictive, it tends to be less expensive. Nonetheless, short-term programs designed for jail inmates with addiction issues do exist, such as an intensive 30-day drug treatment program. But the effectiveness of such interventions varies widely based on the design of the program. So the research tends to show that more intensive, longer-term drug treatment tends to work better, and so the effectiveness is a little bit, again, squishy, a little bit lacking in confidence about just how effective these programs are in jail. But again, there's there could be arguments for and against. We won't get into that right now. For inmates in prison, long-term treatments are possible. So again, prisons are long-term facilities compared, in contrast to jails, people there for a long time. So there's plenty of time and stability, not people moving out so in and out so quickly. There's time for serious long-term sorts of treatments. The best known in-prison treatment of this type that targets inmates with a substance abuse problem is the therapeutic community, or TC. So that's a term you should know, the therapeutic community. Now, what do they mean by this community? What's that involve? The components of this program include the following. Number one, a separate residential unit isolated from the general prison population. So this is a special unit separated off to provide a sense of safety and belonging as the TC participants begin the process of change. So they found, this is sort of research-based, that there's some effectiveness here. You take these folks, you put them in a different place. They're in a community of all people who have drug issues, and they're working together, working through it as a community to try to get people healed, beyond these substance use disorders. Number two, a demanding program including active participation in several hours of structured intervention per day. So that's pretty intensive. It's almost like a job that you're doing every day while you're in prison, working on your drug abuse issues. That requires emotional, physical, and intellectual work on their part. So you don't need to know every detail about this, but you need to know that it's sort of, these folks are separated, they're a community, it's intensive, it involves a lot of time. They have, number three, increased responsibilities and incentives to encourage the residents to progress through the phases of the program as an indication of right living. So again, it's this sort of community thing. Everybody's working together. And there's rules and there's expectations that people need to follow. Number four, close collaboration between treatment and correction staff. So you got the treatment folks that could be social workers, the sort of counselors types who are working with the more, prison security folks. And everybody's working together, and involvement of the residents in the management, operation, and treatment for the TC community. So again, very community cooperation, everybody's involved kind of approach. Community as method is the therapeutic strategy whereby residents must actively participate in the community activities and take on the responsibility for not only themselves and their own behavior, their own recovery from drugs, but also the well-being, the recovery of their peers, the people around them, the other people in the community. So I can't stress enough the sort of community sense of what's going on here. The groups working together and everybody's pulling together. Number six, generally a period of 6 to 12 months of treatment, typically available toward the end of a person's prison sentence. And this isn't something that's available to everybody. Again, it may be something you work towards and you do in the final months before, as you're working towards release from prison. Intermediate sanctions. So we've been talking about jail and prison, but what's this intermediate sanction stuff? This is an approach that is between probation and prison. So probation is traditionally thought of as kind of the slap on the wrist, the easier sort of thing, where you're just under supervision in the community, but you're free, member of open society, but just with monitoring, supervision, surveillance, all the rules and all that kind of stuff. But you're not in prison, you're not in jail. And jail is thought of as being the hard, strict type of punishment, type of consequence for crime. So there's this range of options in between the least restrictive and the most restrictive that provides a range of options for a judge to tailor sentencing to the individual's needs, and while also providing increased accountability for their crimes. So it's not, it's kind of like thought of as some judges who don't really like probation because they think probation's a little too easy, just slap on the wrist, may like this intermediate sanctions because it's something that involves, you can focus on accountability, responsibility, following rules, play by the rules, and you can avoid prison. But screw up, don't follow the rules, and you could end up in prison, that kind of thing. So examples of deterrence. So we're talking about a couple different types. Deterrence-based Intermediate sanctions include fines, so here we're talking about money, drug testing, electronic monitoring, house arrest, and boot camps. So these are all different options that, again, it falls short of prison. It's not getting incarcerated, but it is one that's sort of like, hey, work with us, follow the rules, or you're going to get punished. You're going to get something worse. We'll give you a break and let you do one of these things that's milder than prison. But if you're not following the rules, you're not progressing, you're not playing along, maybe you're going to end up in prison, that kind of stuff. So that's kind of deterrence based. It's sort of, follow the rules or else, that kind of stuff. We'll give you this easier opportunity or else, depending on your behavior. Examples of rehabilitative intermediate sanctions include drug and alcohol treatment, could be in a residential facility place where you're living there, or it could be an outpatient one where you're just visiting. And also other things like mental health interventions if you got mental health issues, and drug courts too, which we'll get to the drug courts here in a couple minutes. Again, the focus is on rehabilitation. You got issues, you got challenges, you've got some weaknesses. We're going to work on those weaknesses that may be driving your criminal behavior. So we're going to work on those and try to rehabilitate you of these challenges. Again, more positive as opposed to the deterrence, threat-based kind of approach. The goal with these strategies is to teach, with the rehabilitative strategies, is to teach skills. It's about skills that you need to learn to be able to better avoid criminal behavior and drug abusive behavior. Some intermediate sanctions have restorative justice features, such as victim restitution and community service, where defendants must work to restore the damage done to the community. So again, this is kind of you've done some bad stuff, you've hurt the community, you need to pay back the community, work for the community, improve the community. That's what we mean when we're talking about restorative justice types of approaches. Community residential centers serve individuals who are leaving prison with housing, jobs, support, and treatment to assist re-entry. So here we're talking about these are places where you're living, but it's not prison. It's not probation where you're on your own. It's kind of in the middle. It says intermediate sanctions. So it's in the community, a residence thing, less restrictive though than say prison. They also serve as an alternative to incarceration for probationers, people on probation in need of more intensive supervision or treatment. So again, intermediate, not purely probation and not getting locked up in a traditional jail and prison situation. Historically called halfway houses, they serve people both halfway out and halfway into prison. Some of these facilities are secure, meaning residents are not free to come and go. So there's different places with different levels of strictness. Escape charges can be filed against participants for any unauthorized leave. So if you don't have permission to leave and you take off, then you could be given escape charges that you've taken off when you don't have permission to do that. Other facilities operate as a more typical halfway house in that individuals are required to seek out jobs. So you got to look for a job, you got to work, you got to attend self-help meetings, say for example, like Alcoholics Anonymous sort of meeting, keep appointments in the community, be a good, reliable worker. There's rules and that kind of stuff. You break the rules, well, maybe you're going to lose your opportunity to be in this sort of halfway house situation. While many community residential centers are funded and operated through state and the government money, and county social service agencies, private and nonprofit facilities are prevalent as well. So you got folks, private organizations, not the government, who are also involved in these sorts of services, this kind of community approach to rehabilitation, getting folks on the right track. Nearly all the residential treatment centers offer some services to address substance abuse issues. Again, substance abuse issues are so common among these offenders that just about all of these treatment centers that are dealing with a lot of different issues and criminal behavior and et cetera, could be sex offenders and could be people who've got problems with domestic violence, that kind of stuff, and all different range of issues. Drugs is a common denominator with many of these different problems. And so most of these places are going to be treating the drug issue along with other issues. In more traditional halfway houses, residents work full-time and attend group meetings, and self-help meetings during non-work hours. In secure treatment facilities, time is typically structured around treatment programming so that residents attend several hours of substance abuse programming per week. So again, it's hard to generalize these places because they all have different variations, but you can see how they're all working at different levels to get people back on the right track. These facilities also tend to offer programming or services in other need areas such as education, vocational skills, anger management, and criminal attitudes, criminal thinking, that kind of stuff. So they're attacking these criminogenic needs, these issues that might be driving your criminal behavior or drug abusive behavior. Length of stay in such programs typically range between 3 to 6 months, depending on the program type and the target population, and are offered to both juveniles, so we're talking about kids as well as grown-ups. The effectiveness of these residential correctional programs is as varied as the programs themselves. It's hard to generalize. Sometimes things work, sometimes things don't work, and it's kind of have to go case by case, program by program, type of facility by type of facility. So it's hard to generalize, but there's some effectiveness. Sometimes things work, sometimes things don't work so well. But there's little doubt that even in the case of the most secure facilities, community residential programs are more humanitarian than prison. Okay, they're definitely less restrictive. They're definitely less hardcore than prison, no doubt about that. They do not face the same issues with overcrowding, violence, sexual assault, and substandard health care. I mean, they're not perfect either. Prisons are definitely far from perfect, but these places are better, tend to be significantly better, but it doesn't mean like they're perfect either. Residents also have greater opportunities to engage with family and social supports in the community. There's a positive right there, is with positive connections with family and friends and others in the community. With regard to cost effectiveness, now if you're somebody who is concerned about money, a burden to the taxpayer, the average cost of residential correctional bed is about $50 per day, probably a little more expensive now with all the inflation. But it's about, basically, forget about the dollar amount, it's basically going to be like half what prison or jail costs. Prison, as I said before, more restrictive, more expensive, probably about twice as much money to the taxpayer as these community residential facilities. The effectiveness of these programs in decreasing recidivism can be difficult to measure and varies widely based on the individual who's admitted, what needs are targeted, and how these needs are targeted. In general, community residential programs that adhere to the principles of effective intervention, that R&R that we were talking about before, tend to show better outcomes. Let me say that, speaking specifically about drugs, that drugs indeed, drug problems are a major driver of crime, no doubt about it. And so if you can effectively work on the drug problem, you can have effectiveness to some extent, reducing criminal behavior, violent behavior, theft behavior, the kind of stuff that is more of concern to the community than your own personal drug problem, right? So that's a part of it too. Drugs is definitely central to all of this, and drug issues, drug problems. Now, one final thing, you heard me say a moment ago, they're talking about drug courts. I've already gone a little longer than I wanted to, and I kind of was worried that I would with this chapter. So I have neglected a discussion of drug courts. You guys, I showed you a little introductory video on drug courts, just like 5-minute video before. I want you to take a look on your own at that last section of the textbook, of the chapter, that talks about drug courts, and try to get a general feel, a general picture for how those work. Because that's an important, very important development in our correctional system trying to deal with the drug problem. So on your own, I'm going to leave that to you folks to go over that and make sure, of course, if there's any terms, I like to quiz on terms. So that's one thing to target as you're going through those sections, but try to get a feel for the overall picture of the drug courts.